Welcome to the Martial Arts Psychosis podcast. Grab some coffee, protein shake, or your favorite steroids and enjoy the show.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Martial Arts Psychosis podcast. With me today is one of my favorite people that I met here in Canada, Joy Pavelich. Hey Joy.
Hey.
So I mean, I was thinking about introducing you, but why wouldn't I let you introduce yourself?
Oh wow, that's like writing your own resume. That's hard.
Yeah. I might jump in with some questions though.
Okay, for sure.
Okay, so let's start with something related to MMA, because this podcast will kind of steer away from fighting, in strict technical terms. Like we probably won't talk about fighting per se. We'll talk about struggle. We'll talk about loss, grief, and stuff like that. Things that we all face. But it's equally important for every aspect of life, not just fighting. So you decided a couple of years ago to open an MMA gym. Let's start from there. Okay, and how did that happen? What led to it? And
so yeah, August 4th, 2013.
Okay.
My middle son Eric took his life, and Eric and his older brother Justin, who is a professional MMA fighter, they love to fight. They spent a lot of time in the gym, and it was their happy place. So in a lot of ways, it was a way to honor Eric, without a doubt.
Yeah.
But also that whole struggle and emerge type mentality, and creating a safe place for people, that sense of community. And it was what our family needed as well, to stay close to each other. So building the gym was huge. Everybody came together. Friends were in there painting, and Connor and Justin, and it was you built something of your own, and it's beautiful.
Oh yeah. I can definitely relate to that. Like when I was living back home in Croatia, we also built our gym, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. But well, all beautiful things, I guess, turned to ruins back in Croatia. But still, it's a wonderful experience of building something with people you care about. Right, so I think that's amazing. But tell me more about your what are you doing at CMHA?
So Canadian Mental Health. So again, when you think of life-changing experiences, losing Eric was truly one for all of us in our family. And shortly after he died, there was a job that came open as communications leader at CMHA. My entire career has been in communications. I have a Master of Arts in Professional Communications, trained as a journalist. And this position came open, and it was really soon after Eric died, and a lot of people said, don't do anything in the first year. But it seemed to make sense, and I also thought, like, for the amount of mistakes I've made in my life, if I was going to make one more, it really wasn't going to tip the scales at all. Yeah. And so I took the leap at this time, and I found a place for me to really, I'd say, to grieve, but to heal, to help understand a lot of, the complexities of mental illness. And so, and over the past, it's coming up to 4 years now that I've been at CMHA, that position has evolved. I lead partnerships, as well as communications, fund development, and I'm in charge of the youth strategy as well.
All right. So let's, in order for this podcast to have any type of structure, I wrote a couple of sentences down. So plus I haven't been doing this for a while, so I kind of need to warm up. Let's dive straight into the story. What I liked about you, from the first emails we exchanged, was the fact that you're so vocal about it. And the problem with mental illness is, I know a lot of fighters that have mental illness. A lot of fighters. Okay, probably all of them have mental illness. Probably. Like legitimate illness, legitimate problems with anxiety, legitimate bipolar disorder, you name it. We all have some kind of, you have to be messed up in a certain way to find a safe place in a cage, right? I think so. But they're wonderful people, but still, that's not something I wanted to talk about. So, how did you decide to be so vocal about your story? Wasn't it hard?
So it was, I would say, an instinct more than anything. I know Canadian Living profiled our family in this article about how people are talking about suicide, and it was called Lifting the Veil. But we never ever, it wasn't like we even decided to talk about it. We just did. I think for our family, we knew Eric had struggled in the past. We thought he was doing well. I don't think we really understood what mental illness was at that time, but there's definitely we didn't consciously decide to talk about it. We just did. This is what it was. And then my own research was in the process of narrative completion and how narratives help people heal from trauma. And I guess heal is kind of a ambiguous word, because you really don't heal in trauma. You find ways to move through it. And so, there's a lot of things that happen when you experience a traumatic event, and it is, they call it a one-way door. You walk through it and you can never go back. And so from that, and I studied 3 hockey players who were sexually abused by their hockey coach, and I looked at their public texts, and I looked for patterns that emerged out of that, and there were actually patterns that do, so you have, if you think of our stories, our identities are actually very tied up in the stories we tell ourselves, and with trauma, your identity's fractured because your entire worldview has been destroyed, and you have to try to rebuild it. And so I think, for me, I was walking through the process of narrative completion as I came to tell the story, and then 30% of people actually go on to what they call post-traumatic growth, and that's where you want to tell your story to help others. And
okay, so that there's a term for it.
Yes.
Oh, post-traumatic growth. Nice. I like that. You were talking about, I want to touch on several different things you've just said. I'm super interested in your research. I never knew you did that type of research. So can you tell me more about it? Maybe your crucial findings and what can
well, so again, it was a research study.
Okay.
And I guess so that would be, the stages, your pre-trauma identity, who you are, who you believe, which has really evolved over time. And then this fracturing, and the way trauma is stored in the brain is very different than a healthy memory. So trauma is actually stored as images in the brain in a very chaotic pattern with intense emotion attached to it, whereas a healthy memory is fluid. And so what happens to people who experience trauma is those memories, when you talk about triggers, right?
Yeah.
Those memories, they emerge, and all that intense emotion, I guess, triggers. So what happens with a lot of people, particularly if you do not disclose, so you're holding it in. And so again, if I look at those hockey players, none of them disclosed until they, several years later. But the impact of non-disclosure, of not being able to tell your story, is that you'll be trapped in mental illness and addiction. So there's this sense-making process that has to happen, and that's when you actually decide, you take all these fractured images and you start weaving those memories into a narrative, and so it's a sense-making process that emerges. From that sense-making process, once you're able to say that, you're able to let go of a lot of the things that are incongruent, and so you've created a story that redefines your life, redefines who you are.
Wow, yeah, that's very interesting. You were also mentioning the recovery. Like trauma is a one-way door, right?
Yeah.
And that was kind of my next question. So in my half paranoid head, I always have that kind of motto that during my happy times, I always prepare for the worst, because I kind of feel that misfortune is the only certainty in life. Yeah. And I always think about, okay, right now I'm doing pretty well financially. I'm happy. I have everything I ever wanted. So now in my head, I have to prepare for darker days to come. And I think that makes sense, because half the times it works. But I think for some traumas and for some things that happen to you, like you losing your child, you can never prepare for it. Like whatever you do, you can never prepare for it. So what I'm interested in is your path through that recovery. How did that look like from the day one, and how is it now?
So it's a process, and it's an ever-evolving process. 4 years later, I actually wrote a book. So again, true narrative completion. I did write a book, and it's called Chasing My Son Across Heaven. So for me, losing Eric, my worldview that was destroyed was my faith. I really needed to feel that I could find Eric somewhere. That was for me the biggest thing. Was I couldn't live with the thought of not having faith, because that was the only thing I had to cling to, is that maybe someday I would see him again. So the thought of if there was nothing, then I couldn't live.
I get it.
And so I had to find that, and so in this book, I also talk a lot about things, though, that, we don't talk about grief, and we don't talk about loss, and we don't talk about death, and we don't talk about tragedy. So they're almost like these big secrets. And when you go through it, then it's like, how do I survive this? You're trying to breathe through the moment, and everybody goes home. And you're left with this, and I'll never use the words new normal, because there's nothing normal about it, right? So you're left with this new reality that you have to figure out how to navigate. And so, I trained a lot. The boys and I, even before we opened the gym, that was the way I could spend time with my children, right?
Yeah.
They're super athletic. So Eric took me to the gym, and he was my personal trainer, and I loved it. And I felt part of the community, which is, goes a long way towards why we decided to open a gym. But then I overtrained, and I got sick, because I couldn't eat, and so there's all these wild stress reactions that are happening. And so, I was overtraining, and I had chronic sinus infections from crying so much, but I also became deeply suicidal myself. But I didn't want to talk about it. I did not want to talk about.
How'd you get through it?
I really don't know. Justin and Connor, my other two sons, were the only thing on any given day that kept me from stepping into the abyss, right? I think my pain was so great that I really wanted to go with Eric, but then I'd think, but I can't leave them. I can't leave them to deal with any more pain than they've already got. Yeah. And so that's what I clung to, was standing in the space for them. And I guess the other thing is grief is it's such an isolating experience.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Because I don't think, sorry to interrupt, I'm just gonna jump in with my remark. I just think that any form of suffering is a very, very isolating experience.
Yeah. Because
in today's society it almost became, well, it's not very modern, or like when everyone's looking at your highlights of the day on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, it became, I think that the sadness and the grief and all of the negative emotions became an isolating experience, because you don't have that community to support you anymore, because they support you only in your best days. They're liking your best pictures, they're liking your whatever highlights of your week or of your month or whatever, and I think that support of the community, we are experiencing a community decline as a society, or tribe decline, however you want to call it. But what I'm interested in is how's your community's feedback on that? Was it isolating for you as well, or
no? And thank God for community, actually. So right before Eric died, I had been part of authoring this report for the city of Calgary, or I was editing and just part of the process for the Calgary Poverty Reduction Initiative. And there was these two key findings that emerged. There was four, but the two that really stuck out for me even then were how broad the swath of vulnerability is, and how important community is when tragedy strikes. And so within 5 weeks of that report being released publicly, I'm going to say CEO, I can't remember what his title was, but who led the Poverty Reduction Initiative, he'd lost his house to the flood, and I'd lost my son to suicide. And both of us suddenly, neither of us had ever thought we'd be vulnerable like that, like to something that can actually bring you to your knees. But then again, community. It was community that held us together. And for me, that's always been critical. And what I found is that unconditional love. Like, I had friends who would stay with me in the house for probably for about 3 weeks just to sleep. They'd show up in their pajamas and their toothbrush, and they'd leave in the morning. But I couldn't sleep in that house. Justin and Connor had both gone back to what they were doing, but I was alone in this house. And so, little things like that. And it was community love, and people who would check in and send, bring pictures. And we were so blessed by having a community that cared. But we live in a smaller town.
That's true. How's your, you obviously are pretty vocal about suicide, and once I wrote on Facebook, when I announced you as my first guest here on podcast, a lot of people writing how you were an inspiration to them. So how do you see, in other cases, does the community respond the same, or was that an isolated case?
No, we've been, again, so blessed with a community that's really wrapped themselves around us. And I've heard people say, when things happen, people want you to get over it at a certain point. But I haven't experienced that. And maybe it's being, I don't know why we've had the experience we have, but we found people to be caring and wanting to support and wanting to take that pain away from us. And it's an incredible blessing. And I remember I went, Eric had passed away in my hometown in Saskatchewan. It's a small town, and my 3 best friends from high school were there. And I remember thinking, would I have done that for them? Right? Would I, if this was their children, would I have sent flowers and a card and thought that was enough? And so the experience has changed me as well in being very thoughtful about, when someone's going through something, I want to show up, and I want to show up authentically.
For sure. All right. Yeah, that's an amazing answer. We kind of concluded, we agree that after a serious trauma like that, a serious event like that, recovery exactly isn't possible? Well, what would you say? Is it possible to recover? How would you define recovery?
So recovery, I believe, is being able to have a good quality of life, right? This piece isn't going to change.
So regardless of that
you have to find a way to go on and to manage those things. And for me, I didn't struggle with mental illness before Eric died. I didn't even really understand it. But now I have waves of depression. I know when they are. They're cyclical. I feel myself spiraling downwards, but I also know I'm going to come out of them. And but gym, I have to train. I have to be outside in nature. If I don't, and even at work, my boss knows when I've stopped going to the gym. I start getting, I'm tired, I'm stressed, and then I drop off the gym, and that's when the stress escalates and my anxiety comes up. And so things that I never experienced before Eric died are I think, parts of my life, and they probably will be forever, managing those.
Oh yeah, definitely I can sign everything you said. Not only from my own experience, but as a trainer, I've seen a lot of people that have depression issues, anxiety, which is probably the 2 most prevalent mental illnesses around. Training and having that at least some structure in their life, I think that's very important. And when you're not training and you're stressed out at work, you're so mentally drained that you don't have any energy left to go to the gym. But I think once you start doing anything, just sometimes it's just cleaning the gym, right? You kind of get into that good headspace. And a lot of people that I've talked to, and probably a lot of people that are listening to this that are kind of struggling, should I go to the gym? I'm stressed out. People are tired from work, and then they just binge on hamburgers and cola, and it's just a never-ending cycle of misery. And just going to the gym and getting through that. Okay, I can't remember when in the last 2 years I actually went to the gym yes, I'm gonna train. I always feel I don't want it, but I've never ever felt bad for it afterwards. So I think that it's a great, it's probably the best possible tool to get rid of the stress, anxiety, depression.
I 100% agree. And you know, another thing too, I always think, which, you know, Justin, my oldest son, has always said, is our bodies are 100% representative of what we put into them. So, you know, for me, that's not just our food. That's, you know, mind, body, spirit, you know, whether you meditate, you know, nutrition's critical, how much we sleep. All of these things. And the gym training, that's one of the most important. You know, to me, that is the best prescription you could write anybody, is a prescription for exercise.
Yeah. I've listened to a YouTube clip that was 5 or 6 years ago. And I think the guy was a neurologist. And he said that if anyone could put the benefits of exercise into a pill, that person would be the richest man alive. And I'm 100% agree with that. Do you meditate?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you do for meditation?
You know what? I actually download YouTube videos.
Oh, nice.
You know, at night when I'm going to sleep, especially if I can't sleep, I'll just, you know, have it there beside the bed and I'll just play it. And you know, especially if you get one that you feel comfortable with, then it's almost like your brain becomes trained to just fall asleep. So I take magnesium.
Does that help you sleep? Because it's doing nothing. I was talking to Justin. He'll be one of my guests in the future, and he's like, "Yeah, man, take magnesium. Like you'll fall asleep better." And I've read about it online. It does nothing for me.
So I do a combination of something else called Reloraplex.
Okay, what's that?
I don't even know what's in it. It was so I see a naturopath because, again, I mean, we can treat symptoms or we can try to treat the underlying cause. And so, you know, I did take sleeping pills when Eric died because I also knew that if I couldn't sleep, that everything else was going to go downhill really, really fast. And so, you know, and it was my doctor saying, "Okay, Joy, these weren't meant to be forever." And I was like, "Are you sure?" Because they work pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
And then I had to find other ways to learn to sleep because it was important that I address the underlying, you know, create a healthy lifestyle. And so that was, and so I started seeing a naturopath, and I take tons of vitamins, you know, lots of vitamin D, because here in North America, in Canada, we don't get enough sunlight. I take a lot of vitamin D.
Anywhere, like, just, sorry, my interruptions are just irritating. I'm sorry. But like, I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, and it was Dr. Rhonda Patrick. Because we're all working inside. Right? So working in an office as well as I do. And you're not getting nearly enough vitamin D as you should get. So I think everyone who's working like an office job, which is, I don't know, 90% of population, I guess, should, but that was just a number, speaking from my butt, but still, we should all take vitamin D supplements. So please continue. So using a lot of those, and one of them that they gave me for sleeping was this Reloraplex, but I also have a lot of anxiety. So the magnesium seems to help. So I take magnesium in the morning and at night, and I take the Reloraplex to sleep. I find it works really, really well, and it's all natural. All right, awesome. I mean, you know my standpoint about naturopaths, and
no, I don't.
You don't?
No,
I'm totally against it.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm like super scientifically oriented, and I don't like pseudoscience. But on the other hand, I'm very practical. So if it works, I'm all for it, right? Yeah. So I'm kind of conflicted in there. But let's just step back a little bit. Let's talk about mental illness. So what was Eric's diagnosis?
So Eric had a lot of diagnoses.
Okay.
He started struggling at 13, 14, which is really typical. 70% of symptoms emerge in that time
when he hit puberty, right?
Yeah. That's, you know, one of the most energy consuming times of your life as your body's changing. So he had many, many different diagnoses. Most likely Eric was bipolar 2. And so he was a rapid cycler. They will never use the language. I shouldn't say that for sure, but this is what a forensic psychologist told me, was that they won't use language rapid cycler unless it is bipolar.
Okay.
One of the issues was that at that time, and I don't know if they will now, but they wouldn't diagnose before 18. They would not give you a formal diagnosis. But most likely he was bipolar. Eric definitely had manic episodes, way more depressive episodes, which is consistent with bipolar 2. Elements of psychosis. A lot of people think that psychosis only occurs with schizophrenia. No,
it's a wide range of
yeah. So so most likely bipolar.
All right.
Which it was consistent. Everything was very, very consistent with that.
Okay, so how did manic episodes manifest, and how did depressing episodes manifest?
So manic episodes, Eric would be. He'd be energetic and funny and have so much energy. He couldn't sleep. He did his entire personal training course, over the course of a weekend, right? So he wouldn't sleep. He would, and his brain was on high functioning. He was a genius. He was so incredibly smart. So there was nothing he couldn't do when he was in those episodes. So it wasn't like he thought he could fly. Like that kind of level of manic, but definitely like a heightened energy level. He'd start writing. He'd write and write and write. But it really was more really heightened energy levels, taking on huge tasks, felt he could do anything. Depressive episodes, he couldn't get out of bed, and
that bad.
That bad. But I also think, and he was on a medication that worked really well.
What was he on?
I can't remember.
Oh, okay.
It worked really, really well. There've been a lot of trials and errors, which is typical, again, finding the right medication. And I know this one really worked, but Eric's brain also could not tolerate any kind of substance, like mind-altering substance. So drinking alcohol was like a toxin for Eric. But how do 20-year-old boys in Alberta not drink?
For sure. And I can talk about it from my own experiences. I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder 5 years ago. I know that my triggers can be just a song or a certain sound, or if someone is talking, the rhythm of their words, like the flow there, and I just can't. For days, that's the only thing I could think about. Yeah. Obviously, right now, for the past couple of years, I've been a lot better and everything. But I know when I was in my peak, when it just started, when I had to kind of have that self-talk, say, "Hey, buddy, there's something wrong with you. There's something terribly wrong with you. Like these stones are not moving."
Yeah.
So you see things. They're not supposed to be there, and which was probably why I wasn't psychotic, because I knew at that particular moment, okay, this is something that I shouldn't be seeing this. I'm not well. This is not okay, and I went and asked for help. Luckily, in Croatia, my own experience is that the system around mental health is a lot better than here. One of the rare things that I would consider better. Just because, you go to your family doctor, you tell your family doctor problems you're having, and you're referred to a psychiatrist right away. And psychiatrist does a lot of tests with you and whatnot, and prescribes you medication if he thinks you should be on medication. Mine luckily thought I didn't have to be. For better or for worse, because obviously the state is chronic. But still, how? Especially you at the position that you're at right now at Mental Health, Canada Mental Health Association. How do you see the system right now?
So I work in community, right, which is very different than the clinical piece. I think everyone is in agreement that something has to change. We're underfunded. The mental health community is very much underfunded compared to the global community, and I can't exactly remember the numbers, but if you look at the Mental Health Commission of Canada statistics, it'll show you the percentage of health dollars that are allocated to mental health, and it's very, very low. And then the other thing too is that youth mental health, we know, so if 70% of symptoms emerge in youth, where is the early intervention piece, and so that's something that has to be looked at as well. There's some really exciting stuff happening right now in youth mental health. I've been really fascinated by integrated youth services, which would almost be like taking the Sheldon Kennedy Child Advocacy Center model and applying it to youth mental health. So, typically with mental health, as you know, you have to navigate your own care, and it's pretty hard. It's really hard when you're not well, and it's the only illness. Mental health and addiction. Sorry, I'm going to say problematic substance use because. The Mental Health Commission of Canada, Canadian Centre for Substance Abuse, and CMHA all consider addiction or substance abuse the second most prevalent mental health disorder, because we know that self-medicating is actually a symptom of mental illness. And
yeah, please continue. I'm just having thoughts in my mind. Yeah.
Okay. And I actually totally forgot where I was going with that.
Okay, but can I interrupt you then? Isn't that a symptom of a failed health system as well? Because if you guys are not medicating me as you should, if you're not medicating me adequately, then I have to do something to make my life easier, right? I think that's also, that makes sense.
I think it's more understanding, right? Because I don't want to attack the system at all. What I want to talk about is ways we can do it better. And so, the whole substance use piece. So if we start thinking about, instead of using the term addiction, which is pretty derogatory, and it adds a lot of blame to the individual. But if we start thinking of problematic substance use, then we start realizing that people are using substances to cope with symptoms that are overwhelming. And so I think even that in itself, if we start to define things properly, it will lead us to better solutions. Like mental illness and addiction should be treated together. You can pull the substance out of someone's life, but you still, if you haven't treated the underlying cause, then you're doing a disservice to the individual. So, there's really immediate steps that could be taken. But again, because of underfunding and hopefully, governments everywhere are dealing with the issue of money. Yeah. Right. And that's why I really like things like integrated services, because it's doing things differently. It's not just saying, write a check for more money. It's like, how do we put the client at the center of this equation? And with youth, how do we, what most people, as they transition from youth to adulthood, there's a hard cutoff at 18 right now. So you're in the youth mental health system, you're in the adult mental health system. But I'm actually on the National Advisory Council for the mental health of emerging adults. And that's actually, so that takes that definition, that hard cutoff away, and it actually, lets you look from 17 to 24, 25, even some will say emerging adults up to 29. And so,
which should be the case,
right?
Yeah. And I know not only from my own case, but from a case of my good friend who has mental problems as well. She's suffering from depression, and there is no system, like step-by-step system, that can take you through from symptoms to a controlled therapy of some sort, right? Either you have to pay for it, and if you have mental illness, it's really hard to work and to get any money. And it looks like a vicious cycle to me. All right, so let's talk about a little bit about your. So I'm always fascinated with how people cope with things, because for fighting, that's super important. Coping with fear and coping with your fight preps, that can be transferred to any part of life. It doesn't really matter if it's a cage or a ping pong tournament or whatever. So I'm interested. You went to 2-3 pilgrimages, right? So tell me more about it. What was your motivation behind it, and what did you learn from it?
So I think my fractured faith was my motivation, and being completely propelled by my grief. So my first pilgrimage was in Croatia, and I walked from Split to Medjugorje, and I was searching for God, right? I was searching for a God of my own understanding. It wasn't about religion. It was about this need to connect and believe that there was something more. So it was a very desperate need. And so my first pilgrimage, had met some people in Croatia the year before, and we literally just started walking. And that one, and I didn't prepare for any of them because my grief was propelling me. And so that one, what I really learned was this: I like problem solving. Like it was engaging a different part of me, but I was also searching for this miracle, and I didn't find it. And so then the next year, and I was writing a book at the same time. It's called Chasing My Son Across Heaven.
Is it published?
It's on a publishing list for 2019. I'm actually hoping, and the publisher that has it said if I could find another publisher, that they were okay with that. So I actually do have another publisher, an author, looking at an author, movie director.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, looking at it right now. So my fingers are really crossed because, I speak at conferences and stuff, and people are always, "Where's your book?" And it's like, "Oh, you got to wait another year and a half on that one." And then, but even when parents lose their child, or every time I hear something, I always think, I wish I could just hand you this book. I wouldn't have to retell my story over and over again. I could hand you this book, and you might pick something up that's going to give you the strength to get from today to tomorrow. Because sometimes you don't know that you have that strength in you to get there.
Yeah, and especially that's the problem, as I said, as an isolating experience that grief and suffering in general is. You always think no one ever felt what I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
And once you do find that you're not alone, that a lot of people are feeling what you're feeling, whether it was fear, suffering, sadness, grief, you name it, all those bad emotions that we're not comfortable admitting to ourselves in the first place. I think it's very useful for people to not only listen to podcasts like this. I mean, this is far from a self-help podcast. It's just an informative, like, face-to-face talk. But like reading a book, that to me seems something super valuable.
Well, that's how I heal. Again, when you talk about, I immersed myself in books, right? And people gave me gift certificates to chapters, and I would go in and I would buy books and just to try to make sense of the journey. And that's what I thought too, because it's just something that we don't understand. So anyhow, I was working on my book, and one of my reviewers had like, I thought I'd written it, and she'd gotten back to me, and she said, "Joy, if you're trying to help people, if you want to give them hope, you're not hopeful yet. You're still really, really broken." And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna go write again, and I have to go away. I have to disconnect completely. I'm going to go back to Croatia, and I have this, I found a little villa in a fishing village. And
what did you go to?
Beautiful. Sejet Veronica.
No idea.
It's close to Split. It's
okay. All right.
Yeah, it's just about 5 miles from the Split airport.
All right.
Yeah, near Tregear. Actually, 5 kilometers from Tregear, 8 kilometers from Split.
Okay.
Anyhow, Justin and I was reading a book, and it was Paulo Coelho's The Pilgrimage, and I messaged Justin. I'm like, I'm gonna do the Camino, and he goes, "Have you seen the movie The Way, Mom?" And I was like, and so that's with Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez, and I was like, no. And he goes, "It's my favorite movie. I'm going to do the Camino." So him and I started talking, like, we're going to do this together. And because we train he trains hockey players at the gym. We couldn't go together until September, and then it was the anniversary of Eric's death, and I just was completely overwhelmed and booked a flight, and just I messaged Justin, I'm going. And
tomorrow?
Like, "Oh, I thought we were going together, but okay." And so, this again, when we were talking about healing, being alone in nature. And so I hiked the Camino Primitivo, which is through the northern Asturias. And that's where the original, the King of Asturias went. It's the original way. So what's really been popularized is the French way, but this one is very remote, and it's challenging. And I'm like, this is a metaphor for my journey. And it was incredible. Like, there's wild horse herds up there, and I was alone in nature for hours at a time, and it was really incredible. And then I got to Santiago de Compostela, and there was a Russian girl. Her and I had been walking together, and we had these little... So you carry a stone, but I had a bunch of little stones, and so you're supposed to carry something, which represents what you're carrying in your soul. And so we got to Santiago de Compostela, and it actually felt pretty commercialized. And I didn't find, that incredible healing. And she said, "You want to go to Finisterre?" So, Finisterre is where the Romans believed the earth ended, Finisterre, the end of the earth. And so we hopped a bus the next day and we went to Finisterre and we stood in the ocean and we threw our little stones. And the idea as well is the ocean carries away, or the sea carries your burdens away. And as we're leaving, there's this, so the whole time you're walking, there's these little markers that tell you how far you have to go. And thank God I didn't figure that out until there was 105 kilometers. But anyhow, I'm standing there at the ocean and it says 0.0 kilometers. And then I got to Croatia, and I had actually thought, I'm just going to rewrite my book from a hopeful lens, right? And I sat down, I was like, oh my God, 0.0 kilometers, this is an ending and a beginning, right?
Yeah.
And so there was an entire section of my book that I added, and it was really, that's where that hopefulness came in, was after some of these sacred tracks. And then this year I did one more, went to Fatima, which Eric, so obviously I was born Catholic. I'm practice of faith, but I've become very spiritual as a result of my journey and my search for meaning. And Eric was born on the 75th anniversary of the Miracle of Fatima. So this year would have been his 25th anniversary, and I wanted to be there for the 100th anniversary celebration. So I hiked from Lisbon to Fatima, and but I found incredible healing in those. I don't know if it's the walking, the processing, being out in nature, being vulnerable, being open to trust people, because I really had to trust people on these journeys.
No choice, right?
I don't speak the languages. Like, I've never planned very well. I've told you about that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's just going.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you could have an advice for people that are in an unfortunate situation of any sort, I mean, yours was the unfortunate death of Eric, but people go through like suffering in many different shapes and sizes. So what would be your first line of defense? What would be your advice?
So I actually found, I've always kind of considered myself pretty independent and not needing anyone, and as long as I had my boys, life was good. The biggest thing was the support of community, and I would say being open. I learned, I remember thinking, I will never be able to pay people back. There's so much kindness and so much goodness that was expressed to all of us, and I for the first time in my life, I just had to say thank you. Not just be able to accept and say thank you, and incredible gratitude for that. And so I think be open to how much people care, how good the world really is, not to be scared to be vulnerable.
That's what I've faced when I started developing my symptoms. As I said, they were overwhelming, and it's fascinating to me how many friends you can lose and how many friends you can gain in that process. When you're vulnerable, how many people you actually think high of will prey on that and just use it against you and use it for their own, I don't know what. I guess they felt better just humiliating my state that I was in, which was obviously a mental illness. And how many other people actually offered to help. And yeah, I think that's one of the great processes every single one of us has to go through. Part of growing up, I would say. I did have a question, and it's probably a tough one. In your experience, obviously you've been faced with a lot of cases since you've been so vocal about it. A lot of people are reaching out to you, asking for advice or asking for help. So what's the major concern of those people when their kids kill themselves?
I think, again, it's just you don't think you're gonna survive it.
Yeah.
And for me, my struggle is becoming a container for other people's grief, right? So I'm, it's okay, I promised I'm going to pay this forward for the rest of my life. That's what I can do to kind of, create some sort of balance for the goodness and grace that I experience. But then as a result of that, and because I'm public, people find me. They find me through Facebook. They phone the office, and I become that first entry point for their pain. And I've realized that I also have to create boundaries around that,
Yeah.
because it can really be hard on me, personally. So, what I'm learning is I don't have to save the world on my own, right? I can be a voice, and I can be supportive and loving, but I, like other people had to understand too, they couldn't fix me, nor can I fix someone else. And there's an interesting story I really want to share, because this one, also, I've only started talking really openly about my own struggles, and right before Christmas, so we had a gentleman who, he volunteered. He came to us through the Calgary.
I'll just close the window. Continue talking.
Yeah. Calgary Drug Treatment Program. And he was amazing, right? He looked like your next door neighbor, accountant, great person, so enthusiastic, would do anything to help, right? He really wanted to help others. He was everyone's cheerleader. And he got his 4-year sobriety chip on December 20th. And December 29th, he died of an overdose. And I felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach. And Justin messaged me. Justin had been on a mental health panel with them, and he called me. And I was thinking, like, why? Why him? Like, why, of everyone, why didn't he reach out? I thought, why don't I reach out? Why didn't Eric reach out? Because we're scared to be burdens to others. And so I think also what we can do when we create false heroes, right? Like, someone can look at me and think, wow, Joy survived the death of her son, and look how well Joy's doing.
Yeah.
And we create false heroes that aren't really truthful about how difficult the struggle is. There's hope, but we also have to be honest and authentic about the pieces of it that you have to live through.
All right. So in your experience, because I've read a little bit about suicide a couple of years back, and I don't know what's easier for the people that are left behind. Is it easier when they leave a letter, when they leave a reason, or when they just decide to commit the act?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I remember Justin and Connor. We were all, they were scared, right? Like, what's going to be on Eric's phone? And then, because Eric didn't leave a letter, but Eric was extremely impulsive and a rapid cycler. So, I really believe it was an impulsive act under the influence of alcohol. And most suicides do take place under the influence of substance of some kind.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really high percentage. I'm going to say 80%. I might be wrong, but it's that high.
Makes sense, because alcohol is a depressor.
It's a depressant, and it also loosens your inhibitions. So, it's the perfect storm in some ways. So, but Eric didn't leave a letter. I don't know. I don't know what would have been better. I mean, because you're just devastated. And even if someone does leave a letter, or they're obviously not thinking clearly, because they've just taken their life. So, and I mean, Eric loved, if he had a quality, it was that he loved everyone so incredibly much.
Yeah.
So
just fully immersed into that emotion all the time.
Whatever he did 150%. Like, that was, you haven't been able to meet him, but that would be him. And so, but I remember Justin and Connor, and then they couldn't find his phone. And then the funeral home actually found, it was in his jeans, and gave it to them. And Connor said, like, I was so scared to open that phone and see what was on it, you know. And there wasn't. They found a bunch of Eric's writings, because he loved to write, and a lot of really beautiful words. And I've captured a lot of them in my book, right? I use them to open chapters and stuff. And, he talks about fear. He's kind of an old soul, so a lot of warrior type quotes, right?
Nice.
Like, I think I shared one today on Facebook. It's like, I asked God, what do I do? And you're nothing but a fighter, he replied, or something like that. Yeah,
one of those guys. I mean, I've heard, obviously, from Justin and Connor, so many stories about him. I believe we would have been probably best friends.
Yeah.
If I ever had the chance to meet him. But why I decided to kind of get into your life and meet you and Justin and Connor was the fact that you guys are fighters. You didn't say, oh, like, Eric killed himself and it's a disaster. You find your way through it, or are still trying to find your way through it, which is equally important, if not even more. So you opened a gym.
Yeah.
So, and that gym is right now, it's alive and well, and a lot of programs for children, a lot of programs for disprivileged youth. So I'm gonna hand you the mic now. What are you guys doing right now?
So we have so many different programs, right? And it's all centered around the impetus for the gym was to create a safe space for people, whatever that looks like, right? Like you can leave whatever's happening at the door. And we entered into a partnership with Siksika Nation, which I absolutely love. And it was really neat because that was the day I was leaving for Spain. I was leaving for Spain the next day. And I asked if we could have the gym blessed. And so the Holy Woman came the next, like set up like overnight, and they, the community came and they did traditional blessings of the gym. And when the Holy Woman was finished, she asked me first, and women are so honored in that culture, and so she asked me to step forward first, and she blessed me, and in all Blackfoot. And then when it was over, she said, I don't know why this happened, but I've learned never to ignore the promptings of spirit, and I was asked to honor you with an Indian name, and it's Holy Offering Woman, and I can't say it properly in Blackfoot. I practice it, but that's such a, like, again, if you think about my sacred hikes and stuff, and I've done, I've gone to other places. I've gone to a sacred Blackfoot place down in Montana, and so that was really neat. And she said, what is your intention for this gym? And I said that everyone who walks through the door finds a safe place and finds a home here. And she said, because your intentions are pure, your gym will prosper. And then she, Justin came up next, and he was blessed as well. And then she pointed to Eric's picture, and she said, when you're scared, when you're weak, you look at him. He keeps you strong. And so it was really profound, because in a lot of ways that experience it encapsulates what the gym is and what it was meant to be. And so we have everything from little kids, and there's a sweet little girl that started the other night. It was her first night, and she was 6, and she had the cutest little pigtails. And she made it through the first class, and she's like, I'm staying for the second class. And she didn't give up, right? Like most of the other kids had been there for a long time. And then all of a sudden, at about 7:45, she's, her face is pressed up against the cage. And she's like, I don't want to fight anybody, and they were starting to grapple. But you see the confidence that people get. And that's, when Eric first was my trainer, that's what he said, Mom, you'll get confidence. And yeah. And it's amazing. Like I can step into the gym and I leave feeling a better person. So
Oh yeah. I think that's what all gyms should be. And that's why personally I'm against those big commercial gyms. I hate it because they lack the most important thing about fitness and training any sport, and that's community.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that happen between people who are physically suffering together.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I mean, I'm a sociologist. I should have a professional opinion about it, but I don't. But still, like once you share that cage or that weight room or whatever with a bunch of guys consistently, you develop a relationship through that suffering and through that striving to pursue whatever your goal might be. You develop that relationship that you wouldn't develop otherwise. And I think that's something people are desperate for.
And, we always used to train at another gym, like as a family. We trained at this other gym in Strathmore Target. It's still going. It's a great gym. It's owned by a friend. And, it's a community. And when Eric died, she made sure we all had keys, like that we had our own keys so we could go train whenever we wanted to. And then, I've since had a membership at a big box gym. And I hated it. I actually did not, and I...
You just don't go.
Because that was a community and that was a family. And that's really what we wanted Apex to be, was a community and a family first. And so we're actually moving towards, like, Saturdays are going to be family days.
Awesome.
So, maybe a kid is a member, but a parent isn't. It's like, you know what, today it's a free-for-all. bring your siblings, bring your
For sure.
parents, whatever. But let's make it that Saturdays are for families.
Yeah, awesome, nice, and that's also a good opportunity, because I think that especially during the winter, there's only so many things you can do with your child, right? Because like there's no, I mean, you can't go to a park when it's minus 30. I guess, I don't know. At least I'm not. Yeah, I'm not that type of guy. But like going to the gym and just like holding pads for your kid or whatever, and getting some input from the owner, I think that's amazing. Like I don't see a better way to spend with your child than on a healthy activity.
Yeah.
And I think definitely everyone, not only Strathmore guys, like Calgary or whatever is in a close proximity to Strathmore, should definitely check your gym. Just because like one of the rare gyms, and I've visited a lot of gyms since I've been here. A lot of people are holding that against me, but still, I did, and the sense of community can't be found everywhere. Apex is definitely one of those places, and I love it. I loved working there, and I love to, when I'm passing by, I always come for a visit, and it's an amazing gym, amazing people. And that's what you need. That's why people don't go, like whenever they make those New Year's decisions, okay, I'm gonna get fit this year, and they don't stick to it. And a lot of people have the wrong response to a question why. And it's not because there's something with the gym or with their habits. It's just that they're not finding what they're expecting to find there. They're finding an intimidating environment with music that's usually too loud, and like a lot of jacked people just lifting weights. They don't know what to do. And the only chance for them to get any information is if they overpay a personal trainer. And with some kind of contracts and packages, and it's all commercialized and is dehumanized. That's the problem with fitness. So I think the alternative for those people are exactly smaller gyms like yours is.
And that's why we went with the instructor model. And I remember, training years ago, and I would watch those cycles of people come in, right? They'd come in the beginning of January, and you'd watch them fall off. And it wasn't that they didn't want to get better. They desperately wanted to get better. They wanted to be healthy and well. They didn't know how to do it. And like you said, it's expensive. But having an instructor-based model, that was one of the reasons, was so that people could come in, have someone work with them all the time, very well-qualified instructors that are able to, make sure that you're doing things right, and that your workouts are the right ones, and you're getting the right exercises in, and, all those little pieces. It's a holistic approach to fitness, and it's more expensive than for an operator to have a coach-based format, but it's so much better for the client.
For sure, I agree. Like, usually people that are not in shape, that want to get in shape, they're okay. I'll just go to. They have this rationale, like, okay, I'll just go to Anytime Fitness or one of those bigger chains, and I'll just pay $40 a month, $45 a month, right? Which is nothing.
Yeah.
Which is nothing, and that's great. Like, the price is great. No one can match that price. Smaller gyms cannot match that price, but the quality of service you're getting is completely different. It's black and white. Because at Apex, you can't be there even during open gyms and not get coached.
Yeah.
You're monitored every single time. And that's something people are paying personal trainers for.
Right.
What, to count their reps?
Yeah.
And it's like, and I don't know, like the fitness industry, especially here, like I could even make that distinction between a couple of countries in Europe and Canada. Alberta, I mean, this is my Canadian experience, and it's very different. It is very different. I think that fitness scene here is like if we talk about the quality of the equipment, if we talk about the gyms are huge, spacious. You can, like, they're cheap, like especially those like chains.
Yeah.
They're super cheap. But they're so dehumanizing. I hate it. I do go to a bigger gym, and I don't like going there. I'm just going there because I have to.
Yeah.
You have to lift weights somewhere.
Yeah.
So, and that's the closest one to my work. But other than that, I was pretty disappointed with the whole scene. And that's like, if anyone is near your gym or near any smaller gym, I think that's the way to go.
Well, there's some great ones in Calgary here too, right? Like my boys, that's how we actually got, I guess I was working away somewhere, and Eric found a Groupon certificate for MMA University.
Oh yeah,
great place,
gym.
Owned by a wonderful individual. It's a fantastic place, and that's actually how the process kind of started, and the boys would drive into Calgary to train there. So I mean, love to have people come out to Strathmore because it's again, be part of the community and the family, but there's also lots of good gyms in Calgary here.
For sure.
5 Elements.
Cardinal MMA, I'm training there. Yeah, great gym, great group of guys. So I was pleasantly surprised with some guys from Apex. So when I was sparring Reagan and all those guys, they're like amazing training partners. Yeah. And that's something you're looking for. You're looking for that atmosphere and those training partners that you want to go and train with for the sake of just hanging out.
Yeah.
Right? So it's more of a game than an obligation.
Yeah.
So that's what you're looking for if you're getting into fitness. Okay. I don't know if is there something you wanted to talk about and we missed it?
I don't think so. I think we've kind of we've gone all over the map.
Sure.
Yeah.
Where can I
was just gonna say, always grateful for you and Gorana as well, right? When you guys kind of found your way to part of the Apex family, and hopefully as we build the business, we can have you guys back again, because it was again that really, really fun part of having both of you there together.
Oh my God, I don't know why thank you, but my laptop is ruining this moment. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. It's a huge compliment. I love coaching, and I love working there, right? So and I hope in the future it'll definitely work out. So where can people find more about you?
So www.apex-mma.com. Apex MMA, we have a Facebook page, which is actually where we, do a lot of the sharing too. Just things that are going on. But definitely check out our website. The schedule's online there. And I guess the other thing too is, outside of the typical stuff, Justin works with a lot of athletes, like athlete development. So
young hockey players, right?
Young hockey players, sort of the emerging hockey players. He's helping coach as well on the ice, because Justin was a professional hockey player, semi-professional for a long time. So he brings a lot of those elite athlete mindset skills that need to be developed. And so we do special rentals for groups. We do private training for groups, and I think that's a neat niche market as well. So
definitely one of the best gyms I've ever been to, and I've been to a lot of gyms. So my recommendation is a warranty. So guys, if you're close by, make sure you visit Apex MMA. All right. Thank you, Joy. Thanks for doing this. It was a pleasure. Thank you, guys. This would usually be the moment where I'm introducing our sponsors. We don't have sponsors yet. And I'm hoping that'll change soon. I don't know, if you have some extra money, some extra cash you want to pump into this podcast, I don't know, buy a new camera or new equipment of some sort, I'll be happy to accept it. And take care, guys. Until next time, peace. Bye.